afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday afternoon. Thank you for all our attendees for dialing in. And also thank you for all our organizing and supporting partners. This is a Green SG webinar that's also hosted in conjunction with NParks SustainabilityFest 2021. So thank you to NParks, thank you to People's Association and our speakers from Edible Garden City and Ong as well. So it's been about a week since we are now able to dine out. So very appropriate, we'll be talking about food. But more specifically today, we're going to talk about how we farm the food and where we get the food. And in this context, we'll be talking about farming it in our local areas, our green spaces. So today's webinar is a very interesting format. We will have a presentation by our speakers first. And then after that, there'll be a question and answer session, which all attendees are invited to join us. So to join in our question and answer session, right, you can simply use your raise hand function on Zoom, or you can just send a direct chat to our speakers, and our speakers will be looking out and they will answer you directly. If you have any difficulties during this webinar, just feel free to approach Hui Chin and Su Chen through the Zoom chat function. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to our moderator for today, Aslam. Over to you, Aslam.
Thank you so much, David. Just a sound check. Can you hear me? That's good. Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us on a Sunday, and a very warm welcome. So today, as David has said, it's a very timely topic. It's a topic that I think will be of keen interest to many people, especially in the face of the ongoing pandemic, and of course, how climate crisis could also inadvertently impact, food and how we bring food to the table. So I would like to take the opportunity to first introduce our speakers. And we have three extremely illustrious speakers who are going to present their unique perspective from the disciplines that they practice. First off, we have Mr. Bjorn Loh. Bjorn is the Executive Director and co-founder of Edible Garden City and the founder of Citizen Farm. His goal is to help cities become more self-sufficient by growing food in underutilized spaces like rooftops and under viaducts. Bjorn is integrating farming into cityscapes, helping Singaporeans reconsider the potential of their limited yet promising land. Since 2012, his company Edible Garden City has won 6 awards and done more than 200 edible gardens all over Singapore. They are also a social enterprise and aim to help a more inclusive economy by hiring the elderly and people with mental disabilities to work with them. We are also pleased today to have with us Mr. Andrew Lee, our second speaker. Andrew is the leader of SUTD's Architect in Residence team and the director of Ong. He has more than 27 years of experience in the design and development of residential infrastructure, major master planning, commercial and institutional projects. With his comprehensive experience, Andrew's designs are both creative and iconic. His project spans many countries in Southeast Asia, such as Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, India, Indonesia, Mongolia, and China. Last but not least, we have Dr. Wilson Wong. Wilson is the Deputy Director of Operations in Jurong Lake Gardens and an Adjunct Assistant Professor in NUS Food, Science and Technology program. He is an expert in growing edible plants and has many years of experience in community gardening. He is also a recognizable face in many of NParks' online gardening programs and is a resident columnist for Root Awakening in the Straits Times Life section since 2007. We are indeed very privileged today to have 3 extremely experienced speakers to share their thoughts. So as David has introduced, our format really is for our speakers to present their thoughts for about 5 to 10 minutes. Thereafter, When each of the speakers have completed, we have a Q&A between the moderator and the speaker, and then towards the end, we will open up to the audience for you to ask questions to the speakers. But in the meantime, if you do have questions, don't hesitate to post them in the chat group. I know all of you have done your poll. In between the session, we'll also share the poll results and have a dialogue with the speakers on the results and their thoughts on that. So with that in mind, I'd like to pass the first mic over to Bjorn. Bjorn?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here. So let me share my screen so you can see my slides. Can everyone see the slides? Is it okay? Can I start? Okay. So thank you again for the opportunity to share. I wanted to share a little bit about my own journey and also what we have done, where we see the future of urban agriculture moving towards. I started my farming journey really not in Singapore, but I remember growing up in Singapore in the 80s. You know, there wasn't many farms already at that time. And I never really encountered farm or farm animals. Going to the wet market in the 80s, I still remember, you know, at the corner, there always will have the chicken seller, the poultry seller, and then there will be caged animals, always very dark and dingy and very scary. I think that disconnect between us and food has sort of gotten bigger over time, and I really wanted to rediscover what it meant to be growing my own food again. So I spent quite a number of years on organic farms, small organic farms, leading a very self-sufficient life. If you look at this yurt, I lived without electricity or running water for a good whole year, just to really experience what it's like growing your own food for sustenance, and you know, making all your own materials to eat, and it's really great because very liberating. I didn't actually spend much money, which was actually quite liberating. Um, but when you start looking at the food system globally, how it has changed over the last decade, commercialization, high-tech farming, new chemicals, new methods, has created a very corporatized food system, which in many sense is like a factory farms. They are factory farms, right? Producing food out for the people, which sometimes, while it can feed you know, the global population, sometimes there are challenges within this. So with those understanding, I came back to Singapore to look at what was possible in our small little island. Singapore actually has quite a interesting history in agriculture. If you look at this picture of the pig, this was done by Hui Ying Or, who was the third generation hydroponic farmers from Old Chin Huat. So they were pig farmers before, and Singapore in the 70s was so productive that we were actually exporting pork and produced enough eggs, 100% of all our eggs at that time. Over time, of course, with you know, the resettlement of farms, a reduced focus on agriculture. Today, we are farming on 1% of our land, and we import 90% of our food from 170 countries as a strategy for food resiliency, which is great, which has done us a lot of good in terms of food security. What has happened though is we have not considered sometimes the impact that this has made in neighboring countries, like this picture in Cameron Highlands, producing vegetables that is supplied into Singapore daily. If you look at the environmental degradation or the environmental challenges that is faced, you see, you know, landslides, water table pollution, soil erosion. So we sometimes have to ask ourselves, as a major consumption powerhouse like Singapore, we need to have some responsibility on how the environment is being dealt with because of our demand for food. So what we have done over the last 9 years was to really look at how we can bring sort of edible gardening and urban agriculture into the city center using three core principles of sustainability, creating environmental impact, and community engagement. And a lot of times using philosophies and methods that are already been established, from various countries, such as one of these, which is the food foresting concept, using different fruit trees and fruiting shrubs and ground cover crops to create a forest-like environment that is actually very productive as well and suits the tropics perfectly. So we worked out quite a number of plants. Of course, we always reference back to NParks, that giant 1,000 book, 1,000 species book, to look at what is possible. And then we start to layer them, right? If you look at the canopy layers, you have fruit trees, nitrogen fixing trees like moringas, the Sasabinia grandiflora. They provide a good canopy and provide shade to the lower level plants like, the pandans, the chilies, the basil, eggplants, the roselles. Then you layer it with a ground cover to cover your topsoil, to also then produce lots of flowers, edible flowers that attract pollinators to create a biodiverse environment. Of course, the climates, different types of climates, to really create that forest setting. And over time, you can see some of the rooftops that we have worked on using these philosophies of nitrogen fixing with legumes and then digging them in as fertilizer. You start to see these spaces change, into really productive spaces and very biodiverse spaces. We looked at also how do we activate underutilized spaces under the bridge with indoor farming. We looked at, sort of abandoned shop houses. We created indoor farms because there's not a lot of sun in shop houses. But what really came about was the creation of a community of like-minded people wanting to find out more about the food system and how they can participate in it. And that is really where we started to see the value. We started to put a lot more touch points in the city, such as this one at Funan. But really, it's what we see is the people, the disconnection between Singaporeans and farming and the knowledge between that. And we wanted to bridge that a lot more by providing spaces and activities and programs like for schools, for kids as well. Take them away from the iPad. Get them into the garden to do some work. And yeah, it's really about the next generation and teaching them environmental responsibility and ethics so that they can really bring this forward for the future of Singapore. Of course, I'll work with the beneficiaries as well. And the elderly as well, it has been really our focus. We've done quite a number of programs in the rental flats, places like York Hill, to really bring the socially isolated elderly into the space for gardening, for urban farming, so that they can create a community together. And what we found together with NParks and NUS is that through activities of growing your own food, through working with nature and the soil, there actually is a ability for it to reduce stress markers within the body and help improve overall mental well-being. I think that is something really powerful. So when you're growing your own food, you're not only sustaining yourself, nutritionally, but also mentally as well, because you're out there in nature, in community of like-minded people, and can be a very beautiful experience. And I just want to leave everyone a last quote. The ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings. And that's what really urban agriculture is all about. So thank you for your time and for my sharing. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Bjorn, for sharing your insights. Next up, we have Andrew. So, Sadia, I believe we are sharing on Andrew's behalf, right?
No.
Andrew, you're sharing? Okay.
I'm sharing.
Okay. So just a quick suggestion: when we share, just make sure we have in a slide share mode. We can see the screen. I think Bjorn, we saw both your slide share and the next slide. Right, just a suggestion. So, Andrew, all yours.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, thank you. No worries.
You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you very clear. Thank you.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you have a great lunch. as a lot of our conversation is centered around food. I'd like to begin the talk with a short backstory. We all know that food occupies a very central part in the life of Singaporeans. We often hear the phrase, "We got to eat to live." Yet as the title of this presentation, "When was your last Hokkien Mee?" suggests, consuming food goes beyond practical and survival reason and should include well-being reason as well, as I think Bjorn has touched on that a little. The last time most of us have our Hokkien Mee was before the heightened alert. After a month of staying at home, working at home, learning at home, I think most Singaporeans can't wait to just seek out the best food places to enjoy a plate of their favorite food. We all have our favorite food. Some of us, it is Hokkien Mee. It's our favorite food for a number of compelling reasons. Two of my favorite reasons why we enjoy food are as follows. First is the idea that food can form very strong anchorages to our past. They remind us of fond memories, and here I must cite how my mother used to chase me to finish off my plate of noodles during lunch in my younger days. Second is the idea that food can form very strong anchorages to social ties. And here again, I cite how my mother would prepare our favorite food when relatives and friends come over for dinner. Being able to share a plate of favorite food and table with others was my very first introduction as a young boy to what it means to socially belong and to friendship formation. With that as a backstory, I hope that has whet your appetite. Jingwen's tantalizing graphics here shows the various ingredients that form our favorite Hokkien Mee and how these ingredients come from various places in the world and often through very long supply chain. The green colored lines show long supply chain from far places, while the red colored lines show supply line from our neighboring Asian countries. These food ingredients are collected at our port and then redistributed to the 28 districts in Singapore. Up to this point, as the very bold green line shows, that everything is well and good, but COVID-19 pandemic has certainly shown that the global food supply chain can be destabilized. During the pandemic, we have witnessed a chain reaction to the food supply crisis. Food gets harder to grow around the world because of lockdowns, travel restriction, and quarantine measure. This has resulted in labor shortages in the farming industry. The global food supply chain can then sometimes get weakened and at times even disrupted. And you will then realize that food supply may not make it so readily into our 28 district where most of us live and work. So that comes to, with this introduction, it comes to my first question. How will disruption to long supply chain impact your favorite food? The answer, obviously, I think is quite, it's an obvious answer. When food supply chain are disrupted, we will lose our favorite Hokkien Mee or our favorite food. That brings me to my second question. If long supply chain are at risk of disruption, then can shorter supply chain safeguard our favorite food? The answer, obviously, is that shorter supply chain can safeguard our food supply by forming self-sufficient hub within the 28 district of Singapore. These food hubs can be formed by repurposing existing infrastructure, buildings, and car park. I think Bjorn has touched on some of this too. You can colonize spaces below unused spaces in Singapore. As a case in point, just bear with me for a while. Something is wrong. As a case in point is the SUTD student project for Bukit Timah. The existing North and South Grandstand, Annex Car Park, and Overplay Field offers Turf City the opportunity to be repurposed as a food hub. In a small country with limited land, the potential to reuse existing mega structure and space to cultivate food hubs will go some ways to improve future food supply and resilience in Singapore. In Wen Chi's logistic farm project, this one that you're seeing, envisions Turf City as a self-sufficient locale that is characterized as a food hub with cultivation and production facilities. I know Bjorn talked about food factories, but they are also one of the players in the scene. It's a food hub with both indoor and outdoor farms. It can be a buzzy mixed-use hub with night markets, a hub with pop-up food street, a hub with a choice hawker center, and an array of culinary eateries. In short, such sufficient food hubs go beyond just safeguarding our food supply. They also create a choice food haven or destination site that hopefully can bring people together and bond the people through food. And this brings me to my third and final question. Can shorter supply chain provide even more or additional food for us to share with others? The answer obviously is that yes, it can. Shorter supply chain can do that by activating common areas and apartment homes as food farms. And in Singting's housing project and in one of Ong and Ong's housing project, food is not only cultivated, but can be shared and consumed with neighbors in common areas and homes in the following manner. We can, for instance, introduce community farms at ground level, and community celebration and events can be held during harvest time. Community farms can be introduced at high-rise common areas. Here is a suggestion of community farms at common area in a high-rise setting. And we can equip homes with farms to provide additional source of food supply. With this additional source of food supply, obviously, it will allow us to share our favorite food with our neighbors. And it can definitely allow us to share our favorite food. Sharing our favorite food can strengthen ties between people. Food is often seen as a social glue in Singapore. Food can draw communities together and strengthen a community sense of identity. Eating together denotes inclusion and belonging. Yes, we do eat to live and survive, and it is the role of planning and architecture to support this cause, but we are also what we fondly choose to eat and whom we eat with. To this end, planning and architecture may have an even greater role to play to ensure that cities don't remain just as functional places with sufficient food supply, but they are also humane and inspiring places to live and have great meals together. We have prepared for this webinar a series of infographics. Just a caveat, these infographics carries with it very broad assumptions. They are speculative data meant to generate further discussion. They are not meant as planning guidelines to be implemented. Just take it with in that spirit. The first infographics that we are showing here is a typical 4-room floor plan unit of HDB apartment. Please take note of the balcony area. You see a 3-meter long balcony that can be utilized for home farms. And the assumption is that if every HDB dwelling unit adopts approximately 3 square meters of home farms, we can have a yield of about 14 kg of fresh produce every 2 weeks. You see the background of my Zoom. That is actually the chai sim grown on a HDB apartment by my friend. So taking current fair price, current NTUC fair prices, we can have a fortnightly saving of approximately 70 kg or even an annual saving of approximately $1,800. And that's quite a fair bit of saving if you grow your own food. Next infographic here is that if every HDB dwelling unit in Singapore adopts, say, 3 square meters of home farm, the additional farm area in Singapore is just over 3 million square meters. And similarly, if every of the 28 districts in Singapore has their own, say, food hub, we can also increase the amount of additional farm area in Singapore by just under 3 million square meters. And if you add these two figures together, plus the existing farmland in Singapore, we can project the approximately land area dedicated to farms to be just over 8 million square meters So the question is, in many people's mind, is what is 8 million square meter? How large is it? So as part of it, here are some comparatives. It will be roughly equivalent to maybe 4 times of the existing farmland area that you see in Lim Chu Kang. Or it could be equivalent to, say, 2 times of our Sentosa Island, or 1 time of our East Coast District 5, maybe 10 times of our Bishan Park. And as a kind of fun fact finding, if you line the whole perimeter of Singapore, we could have at least, say, 45 meter wide of coastal green belt. And that can be quite staggering, right? So with this, I kind of conclude my side of the presentation. I hope you have enjoyed the talk. Thank you everyone for listening. I will hand the session back to Aslam. I assume that he's going to buy us all after this talk. A nice plate of Hokkien noodle when we next meet. Back to you, Aslam.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much. Definitely something we can talk about. Sorry if there's an echo. I think there's a bit of an echo at my end. Okay, thank you, Andrew. I think it's very illuminating to see the concept of how we can convert, unused space, especially HDB housing and available space into gardening, and the scale that you have shared, like 2 times Sentosa's, right? Is mind-boggling. So with that, I think it's a nice time to segue into Wilson, Dr. Wilson, and then perhaps Wilson, in your sharing, you could just also share a little bit of your thoughts on the earlier 2 presentations, because you do represent NParks, and from that perspective, an agency's view would be interesting to hear.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Wilson. I work in Jurong Lake Gardens. Everybody talk a little bit about background about themselves, so perhaps I will do so the same. I grew up as an urban kid, despite the fact that I have always been interested in edible plants. But I come from very humble backgrounds. My parents were hawkers, not educated at all. So every time when they go to the market to pick food, to pick up raw materials for their chicken rice store and the Yong Tau Fu store, I was always there to help them. Then every time when I asked the vegetable seller, I said, your winter melon come from where? How does it grow? Can I take the bean and grow? And all that, they get irritated with me. So that started off my gardening journey since young, to kind of because I was extremely curious how all these things grow and how they look like. At that time, we don't have much farms left. I'm 42 this year, so you'll calculate backwards, you roughly know. I always wondered, do winter melons grow on trees? And actually nowadays, children, when I talk to them, I get a bit scared when the kids ask me, when I ask the kids, hey, where do the chickens come from? They tell me from the supermarket. And I used to work in botanic gardens before I came to Jurong Lake Gardens. Over there, I'm pretty sure you all saw a lot of jungle fowl. So when I saw families seeing, they exclaimed, say, wow, chickens can fly. Yeah, I told them, yeah, chickens can fly. Yes. So this is what I have always in my heart. I feel that there's a role to educate, to inspire, and to guide people along. And when I started my gardening journey, we don't have many gardening societies. Back then, NParks was not really doing promotion of gardening. They were just busy planting trees and maintaining gardens, Things were not so sophisticated then. So I started my own hobby group called Green Culture Singapore. Slowly, I started to do gardening talks. I work with NParks Community in Bloom, and we slowly grow together. Then I went on to helm the Root Awakening column Straits Times since 2004 till today, and so on. So for those of you who know me, I'm always on the media for many reasons to promote gardening and so on. And that is something that's very close to my heart. And I am trained in food science, actually. I'm a self-taught horticulturist. So I learned gardening on my own. I kill a lot of plants, right, to learn. So I hope that when y'all learn from me, y'all don't kill as many plants. Then when I went into food science, I learned about the value of food. My parents did food, I grow food, and everything starts to come together. And I teach in NUS on an adjunct basis, and I find that it's very important. I teach my students where food come from. Because I teach the post-harvest module, how to keep your vegetables fresh, how do you keep your meat fresh. So these are things I taught them. I taught them about urban farming as well. I had the chance to bring some of them to Jurong Lake Gardens and see how we grow things. And they were all very surprised because they don't see all this in Singapore. Okay, so this is the background that I have. I always wanted to help people, to get people to be interested in gardening, to learn how plants, okay, parks and gardens have a role in our urban landscapes. And now with this food thing coming on, how community gardening, vegetable gardening, and so on can be therapeutic to all of us, especially during these challenging times whereby a lot of us were locked up at home previously, and how gardening can be therapeutic to all of us. Okay, so let me just share with you the NParks perspective of food plants, community gardening, community farming, and so on. All right. Okay, this is something that probably a lot of you do not know. NParks actually has an edible horticulture master plan. It has 4 main prongs. You have to provide more gardening space, to build capacity and knowledge, to share innovation and put the science to all that gardening that you do. And of course, through gardening, education and outreach. And that's what NParks is very good at, so that we reach out to all of you and get you inspired and guide you along. So for more details on the 4 prongs is that we created more gardening spaces through allotment gardens and so on. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you know that we do a lot of public gardening talks and workshops. And pre-COVID, we actually did quite a bit of garden shows and exhibitions. And inside all these shows and exhibitions, we always take the opportunity to showcase to the public how we can grow plants using various technologies and innovations. And last but not least, even though with COVID now going on, right, as this is part of the Sustainable Festival in Jurong Lake Gardens, we actually seized the opportunity, NParks, whereby we actually organize a lot of programs, talks, workshops, all on our NParks YouTube channel through Zoom and so on, right? So nowadays, even you don't have a physical space, we can still connect to you. So allotment gardens, parks of gardens, this is not new anymore. Everybody queues up for this. So Jurong Lake Gardens today, we have 300 plots, still by far the largest allotment garden in Singapore. And more spaces are being carved out in our public parks and gardens to have all these plots that is accessible to the public, to you and I, where you ballot and get a plot and garden for a minimal fee for a period of 3 years. Okay, so besides allotment gardens, I'm pretty sure a lot of you sometimes go and look for your town councils to get land below your blocks and open up new gardens in high top of the rooftop of your car parks and so on. So all these spaces are available for gardening. And of course, to build capacity and knowledge, we have a lot of gardening and talks. Like yesterday, you see me down there, I was giving a talk on how you deal with pest issues, sustainability in your garden. And we teach people how to do various things like bokashi composting that you can do at home. Singapore is actually not lacking in food, to be frank. We throw away a lot of our food. Some of my colleagues always tell me, oh, I scared fat, I don't want to eat, then they throw away, right? So gardening, when you grow your edible plants, and a lot of people after growing edible plants tell me how difficult it is, and now they start to treasure their food a lot more. Okay, and I have gardening friends whose kids don't eat vegetables, but once they started to grow edibles and they started to eat. So this is the part where nutritional security is extremely important. And of course, NParks, we continue to develop guidebooks and various online resources. Even now, if you don't want to hold on to the physical copy, you go to our website, you can download quite a lot of free resources that you can look at. You know, back in the old days, okay, when I had to get information on growing plants, I go to the library, borrow the book, snatch with people to get the book, and only to find out the book is written in a temperate context, you know, with spring, summer, autumn, winter, nothing that is about Singapore. Right. So now NParks, we work with gardeners, and I do a lot of trials myself with my team in Jurong Lake Gardens, whereby we put forth climate relevant kind of information that makes gardening a lot easier for all of you. And of course, we have a lot of brochures out there. My Community in Bloom CIB colleagues, they put together very short snippets of information in brochures, like no 10 fruiting vegetables, leafy vegetables. Mind you, a lot of people don't know their vegetables. Last time when I teach my kids in the university, everything they tell me is cai. You know, there's a T-shirt even that came out from there. So they don't even know what is chai sim, kai lam, pap or chai and so on and kale. And that's pretty tragic, you know. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to do. And of course, this is something that probably for residents of Jurong, if you come by Jurong Lake Gardens, you probably have seen the hydroponic systems. And also during the last year's Community Garden Festival, the satellite show, we actually put forth how you can grow plants indoors, right? Using grow lights, hydroponics. These are things that are quite raging now. And a lot of you say that your house don't have sunlight, don't have space, but we show you how you can do it using grow lights. LED lights, which is energy saving, yet at the same time you can grow food. Yeah. And of course, people in the heartlands, community gardens, they also adopt all kinds of technologies that you can see here. All right, hydroponics mainly, vertical gardening is so they can grow more food in tight spaces. And we engage the public to do edible community gardening as well. All right, our focus that I want to share with you is that we worked with Jurong Lake Gardens, worked with Foodscape Collective to share with our allotment gardeners how they can actually use garden waste as well as food waste. You can see in the picture on the top right, they brought from home, all right? And yesterday we actually had a panel discussion with with gardeners as well as people from Foodscape Collective to share their views and experiences. And this actually is very important. So how can we reduce food waste, you know, without throwing it all into our incinerators? And you know, Semakau is filling up. All right, so this is extremely important, how we can actually make use of these things which we call waste and turn it into black gold, which you can grow better plants. Okay, it's important for soil health. Yeah, so these are some of the things that we do and more. And of course, to inspire people, all right, and to guide gardeners who just started, we want to tell you that it's possible to grow nice big edibles. So Community Garden Festival, we also have this edibles competition, which we distributed the seeds, and then people grow. And you can see that I was one of the judges with Samuel from Edible Garden City. We were judges, and you can see that I was holding on to the Guinness World Record snake gourd more than 2 meters long. Bukit Panjang people, they are very, very good. All right, so you can see that people are interested, and we show it to you that, you know, people can actually, in Singapore, it's actually possible. And of course, this is going to sum up my sharing. Last year, we launched the edible gardening with edibles program during the circuit breaker period. And it was a hit, I would say. Which government agency gives out free seeds? So it is important as part of our growing our city in nature vision for NParks. So we actually distributed more than 400,000 packets of seeds, all right? And because we can't have physical contact, no workshops, no talks, we seized the opportunity to use social media, where we put up a lot of videos on how to grow plants and so on, okay? And then you can see the statistics over there. All right, so we actually had master classes to teach you specifically how to grow certain crops. And also during that period till now, we have also been unveiling more and more new allotment garden plots for people to ballot. All right, so the Gardening with Edibles program, we basically distributed common leafy and fruited vegetables to people. And a lot of people tell me, I didn't know that the seeds of these plants are so small. And a lot of people really didn't know how to grow. And that tells me and the organization that how important our job actually is to provide that guidance to all of you. And all this is very important because it helps us to augment what the government is trying to do. NParks City in Nature vision, okay, to have this community ownership and stewardship for nature. Okay, how nature is important, how nature is beneficial to us and the city-state. Okay, why? Because it brings forth health and well-being to all of us. Okay, I'm pretty sure a lot of you, when your gyms are not open, you want to go and do gardening, you come to our parks to exercise, you breathe in fresh air, you see nature. It is something what we call biophilia. We just want to be near nature. It heals us. Okay, and gardening and edibles is to actually focuses on edible gardening. It supports, okay, SFA's Singapore Food Agency 30 by 30 vision to produce 30% of Singapore's nutritional needs by 2030. Okay, I find that this is extremely important because we don't have any more agriculture for quite a while. The universities were not really teaching horticulture and agriculture. So where does all the knowledge come from? Right? So NParks, now when we're doing this, we're nurturing gardeners and farmers probably for the future to grow food and provide food and have this maintain this green infrastructure that is very vital to living in this small little island which we call home Singapore. Okay, so I hope that this sharing will give you some insights, and I welcome your questions. Thank you. Over to you, Aslam.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Wilson. Actually, it's very interesting to see. I think for me, the pictures that you showed on some of the ways in which gardening is being employed, potentially in the community gardens. And thank you for sharing the perspectives, right, of NParks. So basically, just to give you a perspective, we typically would invite our speakers to share slides and to basically share insights and perspectives that perhaps we may not know. And the idea is to bring speakers from different disciplines to share different ways of thinking about a particular issue. And I hope from their sharing, you have gained some idea and some perspectives. I want to perhaps also start the dialogue and discussion with the speakers with some questions and answers. And maybe the first question is to Bjorn. So Bjorn, you have obviously, incidentally, Bjorn is now in Melbourne. Was it Melbourne, right? Still in Melbourne? And he's dialing in from Melbourne. And so Bjorn, you travel around the world. You have been to many different farms, you look at what Singapore is pursuing, what Wilson has just shared. And obviously, you are very familiar with many of the programs we have as a nation. And you see what the other countries are doing. What are some trends that you are seeing today that potentially we may not be adopting, but it's an opportunity for us to consider?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Aslam. And definitely having been sort of in this space for the last 12 years and visiting a lot of various cities like Taiwan, Korea, Indonesia, places, urban agriculture has always been there and is starting to take momentum, gather momentum. But if you look at these countries, they are all agrarian powerhouse, so they're all agriculture is a big GDP of their nation, right? Agricultural knowledge is actually quite entrenched in these countries. But yet they have positioned urban agriculture as one of the very important community binding and community bonding type activity. In Melbourne itself, there is very robust sort of urban food policies that have been built up. And they sort of define urban Melbourne food bowl because they are losing land to peri-urban development, and that's enroaching into farmlands, right? So how do they then bring farms into the city where it's closer, where people can be closer to the source? So there's some policies that we have seen, for example, the green mark type sort of accreditation. In Melbourne, in Australia, they have one that sort of dictates your building, your development have to have a percentage of your landscape area to be food producing. So that kind of then you can achieve some sort of green mark. So I think these are all very positive policies that perhaps Singapore, we are a garden city, right? We have all the green infrastructure already. A lot of them are ornamental in nature. So a lot of bougainvilleas here. So if we are able to slowly convert those into things that grow very easily in our tropical climate, like sweet potato, for example, then we can somehow create a nutritional bank and a sort of a foundation, a safety net, for our food resiliency. So I think those policies are quite strong. And other roles that urban farms have played, for example, in Korea, in Seoul, urban farming is actually really big there. So they have actually converted a lot of spaces into urban farms. And urban farms serve as a training spot for urban people wanting to move back to the countryside to become farmers. So that was their first touch. They go and learn from the urban farmers, then say, okay, I'm ready. I'll go back to the country and start a farm. I think Singapore a bit challenging because our countryside is quite small, right? So accessibility to land is also challenging. But it becomes that area of knowledge for people to really try out before they actually devote their life to pursuing agriculture as a lifestyle or as a business. Yeah. So these are a few things that we've seen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. I just want to bring Andrew into the conversation right now. So Andrew, you gave some fairly mind-blowing numbers from the context of a dense urban city on how we potentially could reconfigure some of the available land right up to the corridors of HDBs. So I was watching the group chats. We actually have a lot of questions on can we really do that in the corridors? Is this something the government, HDB would allow, etc., etc.? So of course, HDB town councils are not here, so we can't really speak for them. But I think the larger question, Andrew, is while the design may suggest it's possible, would there be a need for us to change behaviors? Perhaps, how would this affect community? I know maybe this is not exactly an architectural question, but I wonder from an architectural perspective on how we design to bring people together. How will this help in building that community resilience, building more resilience in appreciating food, etc. I think Wilson, feel free to jump in on that point as well, because you did talk about food wastage. Andrew? You can unmute. Yeah.
Okay, I heard the question intermittently. It broke up every now and then, but I will assume that I got your question. For me, in Singapore, by and large, has been quite an interesting country in the sense that the state apparatus does a lot of work for the citizens. So we kind of grow up. It's a country that's well planned, very well executed, and many things are being done for us. And these in short, maybe the mindset change here is for the people to be aware that they have a role to contribute to it as well. I think that is the first and foremost mindset change that people need to start to understand, and so that we can take some ownership instead of worrying about where is my next meal going to come from because we can't get a supply somewhere else. Maybe it's just starting to look at the fact that we can take ownership of it by growing some of it at our front yard, our backyard. And when that mindset change starts, then we can explore planning options, right? And take that idea into a physical planning. So for instance, if the whole block starts to feel that it is important to be able to grow, and daylight is an important factor if we don't want to use too many of these LEDs, then corridors, maybe the slab block with long corridors that is facing the that has a large exposure to daylight would be one model in which we can plan our flats. whether that's a throwback to the old days where we know the corridor types of housing blocks, or as opposed to the point block where corridors and common areas are internalized with very little daylight in, it may start to have a planning model for that. And then we can take it further into common areas. And this is where I think Singapore is very interesting. So the first idea is that we have to learn to, the mindset change is that people got to take ownership of it. Secondly is that Singapore has a very unique middle ground. And I think NParks in itself is an amazing organization in the sense that very seldom do you find an agency playing that role of being an effecting education and policy changes too. More often than not, they administer rules. Here, it is less of a rule administration and more an invitation to come and conjoin together to develop a green agenda. I think that's important. But a lot of the gaps are also being filled in by social enterprises like what Beyond is doing with Ediblescape. They create even further awareness. So I think if we work at it at a few scale, at the agency scale, where you have a very forward-looking agency like NParks educating the people, and then many multiple, at the mid-level, you have the social enterprises filling in a lot of other site-specific opportunities, and then the people themselves exploring. Once they have been empowered and know how to do it, the people themselves exploring different leafy species, different exchanging recipes, I think you will start to have a kind of ecosystem going around that will start to make it more sustainable because people want. Okay, I think until that happens, the 30 by 30 may still be largely driven by larger groups producing the greens for us to buy, to purchase. But when the major population starts to feel that they can contribute, I think it will be a sharing economy of some sort, complementing each other. So that's my take on it. That's like,
Thanks,
Wilson,
thanks,
feel
Andrew.
free to join.
Yeah, Wilson, your thoughts?
I think the part on mindset change is very apt, all right? Back in the old days, I still remember last time when my parents, I'm not a particularly brilliant student, to be frank. So back then, my parents always tell me, hey, you know, you never study, right? Next time you'll be a gardener or you'll be farmer. Then you play with the pigs and pig shit to go and take care of and grow plants. So that's what they told me. But nowadays you realize, right, it's sexy to be a farmer, right? To be a gardener. You need knowledge. I mean, to be frank, till today, my parents no longer say anything about me already. They say that the sharing, they saw my sharing, and they say that the science behind it really is something that is not expected. All right. And I think we really need to have this mindset change in the sense that I think the youngsters these days are embracing it. They are no longer going for what we call the conventional jobs. They go for things that they believe in. I can see that big change, right? The farming job, to be very frank, don't pay a lot nowadays because, well, if you are into business, you know, you want your vegetables to be cheap. So that thing rolls backwards, you don't get a lot of salary. But how can we get youngsters to be in? And how can we get Singaporeans to pay more for the food that they eat, that are produced in Singapore? So that's one thing. You know, when I go to the NTUC and buy vegetables, I can see the auntie say, Singapore $4.50, Malaysia $1. Then they go for Malaysia one. Then our local farmers are just going to die a natural death. Okay? Indoor farm, don't talk about it. It's going to cost even more with the power and the technology in. Okay? So that's one. Next is that for us, we really need to, I mean, when it comes to community farming, community gardening and all that, the mindset change has, like what our fellow panelists have said, so far it has always been very top-down. NParks has been driving this, town councils have been driving this, you know. So we really need some ground-up effort, you know, to tell us what they want, and they move it. And also the other thing about this is that human behavior, this is something that we need to work on. okay, for years to come. Like for example, in the community context, when you grow your plants, right, in the allotment gardens, I got see people who are visitors. They'll just go around plucking 1-2 leaves, and I always like to scold them. I say, "Auntie, you pluck 1 leaf. 100 auntie pluck 100 leaves. This plant got nothing left." Then they'll tell me, "Why you so kaypoh? Not your plant, what?" Then when I show NParks logo, they scared already. They think I'm going to summon them. So I told them, I said, only when I have to summon you, then you start to respect our other people's things and what we have grown for the public, right? So this is something that we need to start to human behavior. That's why our allotment gardens are open. We don't lock it up. When you lock it up, it becomes, we are moving away from caged up gardens just for their few individuals, because that's the perception that the public has. So I think there is this mindset. Then corridor gardens, great. I think there are some pilots going on, but it's also another thing about people being responsible gardeners, all right? Your neighbors may not like gardening, you like gardening, and how do you prevent people from plucking your plants, throwing things over, and keeping it tidy? So, you know, other agencies have issues with the corridors because fire escape, right? Cleanliness, mosquito breeding. These are all, to be frank, there's only so much that the government can do, truth be told. All voices down to the people like you and I. We need to change ourselves first before we expect things to change. That's all I have to say. You know, I mean, in terms of people behavior, you know, sometimes I always tell people, don't expect government to always change everything. There's only so much the top can change. But if the people are not willing, what can we do, right? So if you want positive changes, I think we all have to start with ourselves.
Thank you so much, Wilson. And I think you actually raised many points which many of our audiences posted in the chat. You know, functions, you know, issues like pests, issues like sunlight. I think, Andrew, you have addressed that. And of course, you know, just most recent one, Mei-Ling saying people throw things onto her pot. Yeah. I noted some of the comments that, you know, the audio is a bit choppy. So apologies for that, so please bear with us. This is one of the challenges of a virtual session. So we'll do our best to tell, you know, speakers, please take note. Sometimes you can come across choppy. At this point, I want to just draw in the poll results. I want to show the poll results. We actually ran a poll for those of you who joined before we started the session. So if you joined after, unfortunately, the poll would have ended by then. So the poll results, basically we asked 4 questions and we wanted to see your response. So the first question being, for what reasons would you consider growing your own food? The majority said enjoyed the activity. Actually quite a number also talked about environment and stress relief. The second question, is it important for Singaporeans to learn how to grow their own food? Again, strongly agree, very substantial. In fact, no one disagreed. So everyone felt it was important. At the moment, urban and community farming is accessible to me. Seems to be quite balanced. Still quite a number, still in favor of strongly agree and agree. Okay, but there's also a sizable neither agree nor disagree, so they're not sure. And the fourth question is it possible for Singapore to achieve its goal to produce the 30 by 30 goal? And again, overwhelmingly, a lot of people seems to agree. So I just want to put the poll results out here and get the speakers to share your thoughts on this. So bringing Bjorn back into the conversation. Bjorn, do these results surprise you at all, or unsurprising at all?
I think it's expected. So because I think we have seen a surge of interest over the last 4 to 5 years. Even before the food supply disruption, right? Because every year there will be some sort of disruption, whether it's Chinese New Year in Malaysia, check up their price of chili padi. So there's always sort of food supply challenges here and there. It's just that we have a more prolonged one because of the current situation. So I think it's quite expected. Though I'm also very surprised to see it. Everyone is strongly agreeing on that we can hit our 30 by 30 goal, which is surprising. But so because we need everyone to do it, right? Everyone to participate. It's not only a industry or government-led effort. Those will probably only be one chunk. If Andrew's plan gets implemented and all HDB flats have that, then we have a good shot at it. I believe. Yeah.
Andrew, your thoughts?
Yeah, like I said, those data were speculative. Beyond is correct. If everyone it's surprising that we are so optimistic that we can reach this 30 by 30. I hope it's not because they think the government is the one doing this, the 30%. I think we can achieve it more readily if ground up, everyone feels that they have a role to play and is willing to contribute a bit to it. So it's but yet we know, right, that not everyone wants to do urban farming because it's leche, insects are there, half the year I don't have daylight, I got the space, but it's indoor, I got to spend on LEDs. There's so many maintenance issues and insects issue. But that's where I'm very heartened by number one, that many of them, in fact, is in orange, right? They enjoy the activity. The only thing that's going to sustain you is that you enjoy the activity. It becomes something that is part of you. If you always think that it is just a byproduct where someone else is doing it for you, I think the 30 by 30 goal may not be so easily reached if there's no ground up effort. So that's my take on that.
Wilson, what are your views? And I just want to call out maybe, of course, a lot of people are enjoying, and quite a large number of people say that it's important to grow your own food, and I think that's one of your key messages, right? Grow your own food and reduce wastage. So any thoughts on these two questions? Question 2 and perhaps
Question
also on 3. Okay. 1 and 3 as well. I think accessibility.
Okay, I'll just try to answer everything one shot lah.
Okay.
Okay, I will say that we all know gardening, growing things and all that is always a therapeutic activity, especially you watch the thing grow and then at the end you know what goes into it, and you cherish your food a lot more, and it relieves stress. This one depends because if your plants got pests, you also stress like me But okay, it is important for Singaporeans to grow food. Yes, definitely, so that you appreciate the things that's on your table. I remember last time back in the old days, my mother would tell me if I don't finish my rice, I will get ugly wife. I don't finish this, my ears will get cut by the moon. So we don't need all those things to scare us anymore. So now when you have COVID and all that, you start to realize that, oh my God, you can see all the food prices all rising like crazy. Then now you start to realize that food is important, and but the very act of being able to grow it yourself, then you know how difficult it is. All right. And of course, urban farming, community farming is accessible to me. Neither agree this or agree, that kind of thing. I will just tell you that, well, I have to say, Singaporeans, learn to keep your hands to yourself first. Then the farms can open to you. And the gardens can open to you. Because if not, you start plucking and say, I just pluck one only. Why are you so angry? But people spend so much time growing the thing. All right, I can't help it but to say this. And
so
then
you obviously face a lot of that.
yes. And also on the other hand, urban farms and all that, because they're commercial entities, right? Biosecurity is an issue. You do not know only because when you walk around, you bring pests with you on your clothes. Then you go to people's farm and you touch here, touch there. Then the whole farm will be infested by spider mites, and then people no need to have livelihood anymore. So these are things that people need to understand. All right, it's a commercial. They have to make sure that vegetables, the crop is being secured because they got customers to answer to. All right, yeah, and Is it possible for us to produce that food by 30 by 30? Yes and no, definitely, like what everybody says. Cannot just rely on the government, please, right? We all have a part to play, mindset change. And important to ask yourself is that, are you willing to work together as a group, to agree to disagree, to give and take, and work together as a community to kickstart maybe your own HDB flat, the entire block as a community garden? You don't need to always ask for land, to be frank. Land is scarce in Singapore. If we give land to everybody, no more land already, right? So we probably need to start from our own homes, right? Work together. Don't talk about whole block. Maybe it's a bit too unrealistic. Maybe at your own level first, right? Work together, agree, disagree, plan out the crops, plan out the duties, and plan out how you're going to share the harvest, and all the resources going to go in. You cannot expect one person to do it. You cannot expect, say, oh, fair, not fair. When I will just share with you this, something that very interesting. I run a community garden back then in Serangoon North. When I started, I was trying to get volunteers, gardeners, to come and help me maintain the garden. Then people tell me, my leg pain, I cannot squat. But when the harvest is ready, everybody no leg pain, can start to harvest vegetables. So you see the mindset change. Everybody, even a small little effort counts, right? And we must learn to have a more open heart, right? To make this, whether is it gardening, edible gardening at the ground level, all the way right up to the commercial level, we all need to open our hearts and put our foot in and contribute. Okay, cannot always say, I cannot do this, government please, or somebody else, or Wilson Wong, please go and drive it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Wilson. Actually, on that point, I thought maybe Bjorn, since you're now not in Singapore. Of course, you're a Singaporean, but you're not in Singapore now. And you've seen how other places work. How do they handle the community aspects of community gardening or community farming? The issues of collaboration.
Yeah, my biggest gripe with community gardens, when I see community gardens fenced up, it really defeats the purpose of a community garden, right? So I've seen fenced up community gardens in other places as well, not just Singapore. But then they are possibly more of them are to deter wild animals coming in. In Singapore, it's more to deter humans. So it's a bit different in its approach. I think there's a general sense of responsibility in some of these places, but there's still pilferage, and there's still jealousy, there's still squabbles in these community gardens, wherever you are, right? Wherever in the world you are. And I think it's a sort of a process of getting to know people better, how to work together. It's a dynamics. It's a whole society effort to food growing. A lot of these community gardens serve that purpose and provide that platform for us to do so. What I've seen also change quite a bit over the times is that it's that definitely during the sort of lockdown pandemic, you see a lot more people picking this up, right? So community gardens are popping up a lot more also around Australia and around the region as well.
Okay, thank you so much. So a couple of things that really stand out beyond from what you shared. I think, unfortunately, Wilson, or fortunately, Wilson is not uncommon. It's worldwide. Everyone else is also facing the same problems when it comes to community-based gardening. But of course, then, some ways to work around it is something we need to think about as a mindset change. We have about 15 minutes more, and I thought perhaps it is good at this point that we open up the conversation to everyone. We do have some people who have raised hands. But before that, I want to encourage the speakers, if you see any questions posed by any of the audience that you feel you can address and answer, please do not hesitate to do that. I think some are really, really good questions out there. Audience, thank you all for putting your questions into the chat. If we missed out any, please pardon us. We'll try to answer as many as we can. If you have questions, there are two ways you can do it, as what David has shared earlier. You can raise hand or you can post it in a chat group. I think we have one raised hand right now, so I'll just bring that individual into the conversation. So Johnson C. Johnson, you can unmute and then ask your questions and let us know which speaker you wish to answer your question. Johnson?
Okay, yes, my name is Johnson. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to ask question. Now, there's quite a few pockets of land that is unused, mostly state land, some under HDB, and they become forested area. I'm personally quite a weird hiker, and I visited some of these places, and some of these places, they have been used by the resident nearby to farm the area, garden farming. Some of it very, very interesting and very innovative. But recently I can see that through the newspaper and because of media posting, the government is shutting down all these gardens, farm gardens. And it seems to me this contradictory effort. On one hand, certain agency, the government want to encourage the citizen to learn how to garden and to have this habit of going to grow food farm basically. But on the other hand, it shut down all this secret garden. I was thinking, is there a way that we can make use of this state land and then let the people do the farming there as what they are, or just leave them alone? That's
Okay,
one question.
right. Thank you, Johnson. Thank you, Johnson. So I'm not sure if any of the speakers here can address that. I guess maybe we'll try because I don't think I'm sure Bjorn you can't answer that, or you can, or maybe Wilson, you want to start the ball rolling?
I know you're going to ask me.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, I don't have all the details, right? But whatever I can say is that, well, there are designated areas in Singapore which you can do your gardening, right? You can, if you are so interested in gardening, you can actually go and look for your town council to start up a garden near your house, right? And community garden, or otherwise you can, get a plot of land by balloting for our allotment gardens. There are areas where you can actually do, but the reason behind it, why is it that probably we don't, in general, gardens are discouraged elsewhere, is because every piece of land in Singapore is scarce, right? It's precious, all right? And if you go around and encroach land and to do your own thing, it's not fair to the rest of the people. Then everybody will start asking, can you please clear more and more state land for me to do my gardening? Right, so that's one question. Then how do you give to which person? You know what I mean? Do we cut up the state land and then start balloting for people? And then next is that when the land is needed for other purposes, like for example, data development, how do you ask people to go? So these are questions, that sometimes I myself, I'm a member of public. So sometimes when you put yourself in the management body, we need to start to think about how can these things be managed before we start giving suggestions and all this to say, do this, because a lot of times, it's how to be fair to you and I. I give it one person, the other person say, I also like to do gardening. Why you don't give it to me, right? So that's
I think coming back, it's this, Johnson, this is probably a policy thing that is challenging for NParks to answer, but it's a good question though. How is this being perceived, right? There's one question in the chat. I thought maybe I'll just draw the speakers back in. The question on the poll, saying that if you look at the environment results relative to food security and cheaper vegetables, the concern for environment seems to be more significant than 52%. If you see, of course, I enjoy the activities right at the top, but if you look at environment and food security, 52% says it is good for the environment. So do any of the speakers wish to touch on that? The question 1, specific to question 1. That growing your own food is good for the environment.
Okay, maybe I can touch on that. Of course, when we do grow our own food, we are cutting down carbon miles, right, from food imports, where 90% of our food is imported. Of course, this is very hard to measure at this point, but there have been quite a bit of work done around this space on measuring carbon footprint of our food. And carbon footprint of our food not only includes how food is transported, is how they are grown, how much damage they are making to the environment in those countries before they come over. And those all contribute to, a global climate change and for the environment. But I think the amount that you grow at home will not be in massive amount. Probably won't feed your whole family or be a constant. You can have perpetual harvest of certain things, but I think it's really the process and really the understanding of nature and how nature works, how it is a journey, how it's a challenge. It really gets you to understand nature a little bit better, and create some sort of environmental responsibility in all of us. Perhaps then when we go out to purchase food or at the supermarket, we'll choose better. We'll choose things that make more ecological sense. We will become more responsible consumers, and that will definitely help the environment in the long run. So I think those intangible, indirect benefits work a lot better.
Yeah. I think, Andrew, your presentation covered a little bit on the footprint, right? The supply chain carbon footprint. So you want to add to that?
For me, maybe this question of environment, since Wilson has come up with a lot of anecdotal account of his early days, I'll share another one. Whenever my parents go and visit and think about buying a property, they will look at whether there are any insects or any kind of life going on in the house. If there isn't, chances are that a house is too clean, and in their terminology is dead. The ecosystem there is not so good. Even the insects doesn't want to come to that place, right? So taking that idea that if we can, that Wilson has suggested, if we ever can have urban farming for a whole HDB block, everybody partaking in it, you may come up with a rich ecosystem that may include not just the greens, but the animal kingdom as well, coming in as a larger ecosystem. And I think in that sense, there are certain measurables that is a good environment. And on that note, say in architectural planning terms, depending on how we are doing the green, if the green lines the facade of a building more predominantly, it may help to cut down the amount of radiance around that vicinity. It may start to promote other form of measurement, that it may be a more comfortable environment. And of course, the third point that I would like to add is this, like growing plants is well and good, but if we start to grow so much and it's not consumed, you can't keep them sometime, and it goes to waste. And so managing food wastage is also a negative part of that environment. So it's, in short, it is everybody's, to tackle this idea of greening the whole city and making it so livable and inviting. I think the call is really for everyone to come together to play the role, because there's a whole management around this idea of making it successful.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Johnson, I see you have come back to raise hands, but maybe I want to bring in the other members in the audience who may have questions first. So if anyone has any question, could you do a raise hand, or so that I know who you are and I can call you out to ask your questions? Anyone? Anyone has any questions? So if not, then I will just take from some of the chat groups, that has been posted. Okay, some of you have directly messaged to me. Actually, it's okay to post it in the chat for everyone. Don't be shy. So let me just ask Ziyong's question. Ziyong directly messaged me. He asked, could the public trees with fruits be a way to provide the fruit supply? So I guess the question maybe was inspired by beyond you sharing all the different kinds of shrubs and trees. And he's wondering if I read the question correctly. Ziyong, feel free to jump in and unmute if I read it wrongly. Can we turn our public trees into fruit trees along the roads?
Maybe I can start with this question. I think Wilson probably have a better in-depth knowledge of this, but from my understanding, in the 60s, in the 70s and early 80s, NParks, or was it a PPD, Primary Productive?
PRD.
PRD.
Parks and Recreation Department, the predecessor of NParks, yeah.
Yeah, before NParks, they planted, I think, 80,000 fruit trees all around Singapore. And that was at the point, because of the reduction in farmlands. The authorities were afraid that people would not recognize what fruits are going to look like, tropical fruits. So that was the effort in putting all these fruit trees. The project actually failed. Because the community didn't want to take care of it. It was supposed to meant to be planted for the community. They take care of it. They find it too hard, and they could buy fruits cheaper from the supermarket or the market. Why do I spend so much time? So I think the authorities had such great foresight, right, during that time to plant all these, and now you still find semblance of them. They're still around. And now you can't pick them, right? So I think, yeah, probably this will be the right time for us to maybe reignite this topic and see how we can actually come together as a community to take care of all those trees.
Yeah, good point. Actually, if you look up some of the books written by IPS, Institute of Policy Study, NUS, there's actually a piece that one of the academics wrote. He actually wrote that was an idea back then. Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, actually, he has a lot of foresight. It was a form of social engineering to put forward so that people can have more ownership to their living environment, right? And actually, you can still see it in our older estates. For example, I think Taman Jurong, certain areas, you still see fruit trees, right? In my army camp, when I go back for my reservice, I still see the decades-old mango tree still there. But yes, this thing is a question that just now I've been talking about it, something about very social. We need to ask ourselves, how can we work together as residents to maintain it, right? So sometimes, I tell people is that you don't always ask NParks to do it, because the thing is that right at your doorstep, your own community gardens, right, and even around your estate, if you can come together and maintain your fruit trees together, all right, then I think that will be a good step to start off with. But of course now, whether it's NParks doing it, yes, in our selected parks like Jurong Lake Gardens, you see that we have fruit trees planted around Garden House. But generally now we are moving towards this, of course it's part of it, we are not ignoring it, is that we are moving towards city nature, which we now bring back. Okay, something I need to tell a lot of us here is that we actually bring back a lot of our native fruit trees and our native plants back into this city, all right? Because due to urbanization way back into the early 1900s, when it was all being cleared for plantations, rubber, oil palm, and all that. We need to bring all these things back so that we live in what we call city nature. Because those of you who grow fruit trees, you understand, right, how important your pollinators are, right? People are scared of bats, but your bats are important to pollinate your durian flowers, your petai flowers. They are so expensive fruits, right? So if you don't have your nature there, you're not going to get all this. If you grow a chili or tomatoes and whatever at home, people tell me they don't fruit. Do you envision one day that you have to pollinate every flower just to get the fruit? Then your food price is going to shoot up. So nature actually has a very important part to play. All right. I mean, a lot of people may not understand why NParks is planting all the trees, or they say, we cannot eat, only Hornbill can eat, I cannot eat. But they are there. We planted all these things is for nature, so that we can bring back the nature. In the end, it's not only just good for you and me, but for our food production, this is important. You need to have that ecosystem to get your fruits and vegetables there for production. For pest control, all right, is important. Just now I saw a lot of pest questions coming up. If you don't have a conducive environment for your ladybugs, for your lizards, for your snakes, then you're going to have an epidemic, of mites, rats, and all that kind of thing. So I hope people understand that, nature is a cycle. What goes back comes back to you. So NParks is trying to put all that things back to make it right for this little island for us, which is so urbanized these days. Yeah. Oh, Aslam, can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Actually, we are at 3:30, so I was just wanted to check in with the speakers and the audience. If it's okay, we just extend it by a little bit. There are some good questions I just want to call in and get your thoughts before we wrap the session up. So there's, coming back to this whole issue of pollination, nature, right? So there's one question on, again, it's about policies, but I thought maybe I'll just direct it more towards the ecosystem, the point about ecosystem. So currently we're talking about urban farming very much in the greens sense, plants and trees. What about farms related to poultries, the animals? Is this even possible to bring them into this whole ecosystem? And I guess that also fits nicely into this 30-30 concept. So any thoughts on, are there any concerns, or is it even possible to flourish the urban farming ecosystem with not just greens but also with animals, or for protein, I guess? Who wants to go? Bjorn, you looks like you're smiling, you're raring to go. You want to take
one of the at least challenge or one of the dreams I have is actually to have a few cows, right, on my farm. It's very hard to have cows in Singapore, right? Just for many factors alone, access to pasture land and things like that. In the past, farm animals, the role animals play in a farm is very important. So whether they are the fertility generator, ruminants, they eat the grass, their poo is actually very good for organic fertilizer that goes back to the soil. You can build a closed-loop farming system with just one cow on 1 acre of land and grow enough food for a family of 4. These are all things that have been written in the past, of course, in a more temperate climate. So animals have been very important in all farms as well. I think in Singapore, it is there are some challenges, right? Because in the urban setting, you don't want to be disamenity to your neighbors when we all live in quite close proximity. So I think chickens are still okay, and now there's a big group of people keeping very interesting chickens at home. They treat them like their pets, and they produce very good high nitrogen fertilizer for your plants, right? Of course, after composting as well. So those are really important. But fishes as well, aquaponic systems that you can build. You can have dual systems and layered systems that do integrate animals into your sort of growing systems or your homes. And that brings a different energy into the space, right? Plants have a very different energy to animals, and they all both work symbiotically together. We just have to be creative on how we approach it.
Okay, so coming to the animal part, that's even more contentious, right? If we can't live together in harmony when you have chickens next door and eat go 5 a.m. in the morning, what is going to happen? Correct or not? So again, you see, I like to bring this thing back to us, to food for thought, to think. You want to have this, think about it. Then of course, Singapore does not have a lot of land. So if you start wanting to have cow farms and all that, you can't stack cows together lah. So far, I think people have been stacking chickens, stacking fish, stacking crabs, smaller things you can stack. but you cannot stack cows. So pigs, we got rid of it because of pollution. Okay, because Singapore has a very big issue, although we don't see, I mean, I have to speak for my sister agency. NEA does a great job in hiding all the waste from all of us until to a point that people take it for granted. Okay, so where does all the waste go to? All right, so this is something where we need to think about. So like President Bjorn has mentioned this, actually, to be frank, animal manure, if you can treat it properly, it makes an excellent fertilizer. All right, it really closed up the loop. So therefore, we are doing food composting first. Once our citizens know how to compost properly, then maybe one day we can start to think about composting all the other things. You know, because you can't get your act together, tomorrow we're going to have food safety problem. Everybody diarrhea. Okay, so I think the animal portion is interesting, but definitely I think moving forward, I'm pretty sure you all heard about lab-grown meat. Okay, lab-grown meat. Mushroom is a very good source of protein, right? Which people are doing. So therefore, now we need to start to think about novel sources of protein. Okay, like you eat your Impossible Burger. Now I'm bringing in my food science thinking. Really. Impossible Burger, your microproteins, your algae proteins, and all that. So all these things can be produced in very small spaces. Okay, and probably cleaner. So it is a time whereby now Singaporeans need to start to think about whether are you ready to diversify your plate, because if you notice one thing is that the Chinese over here eat chai sim, kai lan, bak choy, all that. You ask them to eat something else, eat kale, they say, oh, so rubbery, you cannot eat, not nice, right? So we just as an example, I mean, we need to start to learn to see how we can diversify what we eat. Like all the NParks fruits, all the native fruits, some of them not so nice to eat. People say, you're so sour, but it's still food. And then the other thing about it is that we need to start to think about growing unconventional plants. I mean, meaning that we don't always eat. Okay, what we don't eat here, because a lot of these plants can be would be likely be climate proof, because as we all know that climate change proof, as we all know, rising sea levels, the country is getting hotter, you know, it's getting drier, we're going to have more harsh storms and all that. So there are plants that can actually that can adapt to such conditions, and we need to start to think about how to be open to these plants. You know, they can be grown in our local landscapes, right? Which we can then, you know, incorporate into our diets. And also the other thing about it is about preserving our heritage. This is something that I always tell people is that nowadays, as we move forward towards growing microgreens and all that, all are sexy food, right? But we start to forget about our ulam raja, our daun kadok and all that. So it's time for us to start to revisit some of these before we lose it. It's part of our cultural heritage, part of our history. You know, they have a lot of stories to tell, all these plants, and it's a good way to bring people from all generations together. Okay, and even for our new citizens, they bring in their own new vegetables and all that. It's a good way. Food is a good way to bring all the different, for all walks of life and all that together to talk about food. So these are things we need to start to think about already. Bringing different things that can adapt better to our climate over to just the conventional crops that we've been growing, because they have been selected and bred to be grown and to taste nice, but a lot of them are very hard to grow. They need a lot of resources to keep them pest-free, because Singaporeans will tell you, I pay, why should I get vegetables with holes in it? They are smaller than usual and all that. So yeah, so these are things it's food for thought for us to think about. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we are really crossed the 3:30 mark, which is our end time, and thank you all speakers and audience. But I thought maybe before we end, just a very quick comment from each of the speakers on really sharing with you, I mean, reflecting on the trends that you are now seeing, right? Reflecting on that and reflecting on where Singapore is today. What do you think, you know, if you look at it in a maybe 3 to 5 years horizon, what do you think are the opportunities for Singapore, right, in terms of urban and community farming? So very quick one. I think I'll just start with Andrew here. Then after that, I'll go to Bjorn, and then I'll give the last voice to Wilson. Okay, Andrew, would you like to start us off? Quick one, huh?
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I think the increasing trend is that for me, I feel people are getting aware, being that the efforts made through social media, through what the works that Bjorn and Wilson through NParks have done. I think there's awareness, and that it is now looking quite cool to be somebody that is interested in urban farming or community farm or home farm. Pretty much acceptable, and I think the trend is then for the people to go and explore. Right within it, there are going to be some social groups that can come together and make it successful. So a whole block of people that can work together may say, like, let's grow different crops, and then you can explore with diversity, variety. There's going to be some people that will share recipe and figure out how to have the best out of this. And then you're going to see Instagram moments where some of these are passed down, and we may start a movement. It may not be the whole Singapore, but I think some sector of it is highly possible. And for me, I look forward to that. And being part of this webinar is really just to be part of this awareness machinery that we want to set in motion and not stop. So this is my take on it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bjorn?
Okay, so I think there's a big opportunity in converting a lot of established gardens that are driven by property developers all around Singapore. We have a lot of rooftop gardens. We have a lot of streetscapes that are managed by these private organizations. And the opportunity to convert those into what Wilson has shared earlier, native edible plants that actually don't need massive amount of inputs to manage, and that creates sort of a landscape nutritional index, all across Singapore. Then we can start to really measure that 30 by 30, because this will be something that everyone can possibly fall back on. Imagine if you have tons of sweet potato growing in Bedok, all around the streets, and that is where all the carbohydrates are being stored in the streetscape. So I think that is something that we can lead the region in how we rethink the way we design our cities, using food production as one of the key drivers. I think the opportunity really is there. So really excited.
Thank you, Bjorn. Wilson?
Okay, I'm very happy to be able to share views and hear from people, everyone here, about your views about urban farming, community gardening, and all that. I certainly feel that it's a good time, and the time is now. So it's important for all of us to work together, share our experiences to forge a future forward, because the farming thing in Singapore is unique to us because we are a very small country and our circumstances are different from all the nations around us. So something that we need to come and start to think about it and share. And most importantly is that it all starts with people. So if the mindset change is necessary, so that this green infrastructure that we have around us, the living environment, can be managed together as one people, right? So like, for example, I really do hope one day somebody can tell us and say, hey, NParks, or you can come to the town council and tell, Aslam, hey, this part of the estate, you no need to pay maintenance fee, management fees, and NParks don't need to pay, manage. We come in and do it for you. I'll make sure that it's nicer and better than what you do. If we hit that, I hope this can be done within my lifetime. Whatever that we said today, beautiful landscape, ecological landscape, edible landscapes, if this thing can actually happen without fences, I really do hope that we can see that day come. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can afford to pay for that, but yeah, thank you for the great ideas. First off, so I think we are now 15 minutes out into the allotted time, so I want to thank the speakers for graciously allowing us to extend the time. I think I also want to thank the audience. Don't leave yet, audience. We still have a few things we want to do with you. So thank you all the audience also for joining us. So for me, I guess a few things really stand out. The first one, being the fact that we have more space than we know. I think that's from Andrew. We always say Singapore is small. Actually, Singapore can be bigger than what we think we are. So I want to just add that thought into everyone's mind. Okay, there's a lot of space, right? We just got to think out of the box and be more creative. I think the second point is if you truly believe in it, it is possible. I think the inspiration really is beyond what you have achieved in Edible Garden City, and how you are looking at, building a nutrition portfolio. I mean, the word that came to my mind was a portfolio, right? How it can be segmentized across the nation. So to me, I think that is the second big opportunities and call out that I took away from this call. And Wilson, I think for you, the most outstanding standout for me is mindset. We have to change mindset. And I think that the think about mindset also cuts across everyone. And mindset that, if we really want to build the future of urban farming and community farming, we have to individually change mindset. Cannot be seen as a low wage, low reward opportunity. It's got to be rethought of as a new opportunity for a lot of people. People have to work together. That old gotong royong kampong spirit must come back, and maybe farming together with food can bring that community back together. And I see opportunities in corridor farming being, that opportunity to bring us together to rethink some of the mindset issues.